Welcome to the Whitetail Advantage Podcast with your host, Brett Bovin. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Whitetail Advantage Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Bovin. As usual, the producer is not here with me tonight. Like I said, on his birthday last week, I fired him. No, I'm just kidding. He's not fired. He's just a busy guy, so he gets here when he can. But yeah, the producer is not here with me tonight. But if this is your first time tuning into the show, thank you for tuning in. Excuse me. We do a live show Monday through Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Each week, we cover a new state, and we bring on a different guest each day of the week, and we get their ins and out, find out what advantage that they're doing to be successful out in the field. And it's nice to hear what's going on in that state on the conservation side of everything else. This week, we are in Minnesota. Last week was Michigan. With that being said, we are a part of the pro staff with Gilly Puck. So if you use the code GP10, GP10, you get 10% discount off the products. And with that being said, I'd like to run a quick ad for them. Go ahead, use code GP10, GP10, you get 10% discount on the products. And as you all know, I say it all the effing time, I'm a huge advocate of MAGNUS broadheads. We are not in any way partnered, sponsored with them in any way. I just love their broadheads. And I'm telling you guys, if you can, go buy yourself a pack of MAGNUS broadheads and you're not going to be disappointed. They are the best broadheads, in my opinion, that is out there on the market. It's something true, reliable, and the attention to detail. You guys know I'm an attention to detail type of guy. That's what they're doing there at MAGNUS. Lifetime warranty. The customer service there is amazing. So go ahead and check them out at their website. You can also catch out all of our other podcast shows, episodes on our YouTube, and we're also a part of the Waypoint TV app, so you can go ahead and check them out there. I do ask, though, for the listener and the audience out there to put your quarter in the slot machine. Put your quarter in the slot machine. What do I mean by that? Is to help share the show. I strongly believe that hunting is a dying sport, a dying lifestyle, and I need your guys' help out there to spread the word. So help share the show by putting your quarter in the slot machine. That's what I mean by that. We can't do it without you guys' support. Everyone that is out there that is sharing the show and with your support out there, we truly greatly appreciate it. I can't say thank you enough. This is a podcast that we do live shows. So anyone that ever wants to come on, I'm never going to tell anyone no. So everyone's welcome to come on the show. You don't have to be from the state that we're covering. Just come on the show. You send me a message. Boom. Yep. We're going to get you on. But with that being said, tonight is episode 75. It is Monday, June 3rd. We are in Minnesota. And I was talking to the guest before I bring him on that Minnesota is in the top 3 states that I strongly want to move to go hunt. So I'm curious. I was excited to get to Minnesota week. I'm excited to get him on the show and start off the Minnesota week with a bang. But enough of my normal talking spiel, intro, blah, blah. I'm going to get tired and fall asleep myself. Anyways, let's give a round of applause for Darrin. What's up, brother?
Oh, not too much, man.
You have a good day?
Yeah. Monday, kicking it off right.
Man, freaking Mondays, man. I feel like Garfield sometimes, where he hates Mondays.
Right, every time.
I don't know. But that's at work. When I get off work, it's like, yes, I could start off a new week with a new state.
Right? Well, you got that to look forward to at least, right?
Oh, dude, as soon as I get off work, I can't
No,
get
I'm
off
glad
work.
to be here.
Well, Darrin,
it makes it a whole lot easier.
Oh, exactly. So for everyone that doesn't know you, can you give a little background about yourself, brother?
I'm 37. I've been hunting since early as I could hold a gun. My dad got me into hunting, and then after that, like, it was really my brother and his passion for bow hunting that really kind of like lit a fire in me. And I've been an avid bow hunter for about 2 decades now. And I've only started to like capitalize in the last handful of years. By that I mean like actually putting deer on the ground. Before that, I would sit a lot and I would see a lot of deer, but I wasn't able to. I didn't have the knowledge to really like put myself in the right position. And I think a lot of it was more also like the dedication and then the studying, uh, and learning these animals that helped me be more successful, in recent times.
What
But
have you been doing in these recent years that you feel that you have the reason why you've been so successful?
honestly, a lot of it's e-scouting, with Onyx. Onyx has kind of been like a real game changer. You know, Instead of having to put boots on the ground and get in an area and blow it out, and then you have to wait weeks in order to see any more natural movement. Like you can go on Onyx and e-scout the crap out of a lot of areas, and then you can actually like formulate a plan, go in there and be more surgical about it, versus kind of like driving by, a public spot and just bebopping in and then just blowing it up. You know what I'm saying? So the e-scouting is been a real game changer. That and like trail cameras and cell cameras. I at one point I was running like 9 cameras on very very small acreage. I think I had permission for like 7-8 acres, but the deer would kind of come in and they would use multiple trails. So I had that whole thing just like blocked out with trail cameras, and a lot of glassing from the road and stuff like that. It's a lot of like recon more than it is actual hunting. And even when you're in the stand, I spent a lot of time just kind of watching where deer move and kind of seeing like what they're using in the area as far as like, the mass crop. Are they eating acorns? Like where are they bedding at? Like what times of day are they getting up and moving? Like, and I just kind of make a mental note, but I also go on my phone and I started like making calendar like updates or whatever. We were talking earlier about that big 12 that I shot, and I had basically it was like a birthday reminder on my calendar, like, hey, you saw this deer on this day, in the PM, and then it would just kind of remind me of, oh yeah, it was at this place, and I would go through and I could actually pattern that deer. And this last year, he was coming through like about 2 weeks ahead of schedule. So I kind of made a mental note of that. And I was like, well, if I see him a certain day, I basically got a limited time frame before I see him again. And then he'll be gone for the first part of the rut. And then he might scoot back in towards the end of the rut. And that's what he did. He came in and yeah, he was wore out. He was wore out, but he made the rounds and came back in. I was able to get him with the muzzleloader. So it was a lot of more schoolwork and studying than actual hunting. And don't get me wrong, I put a lot of sits in trying to get that deer, but it was a lot of basic obsession. I really I went off the deep end with that one a little bit, but it was a cool experience because I've never hunted that hard for an animal.
Yeah. One thing you kind of brought something up there that brought something up that I've been kind of doing lately is I have on my notes is the day that I hunt. And then what I'll do is I'll make every little detail note that I can think of. All right, I saw a deer at this time, and then I'll make sure to see. I'll screenshot on my Onyx I was using at the time. This year, I'm gonna be switching to Spartan Forge. Seeing all the weather data that I can see, and I'll screenshot it. So that way I can make those notes later on, like when I get home at night. Like, all right, I seen this deer, and this is what it was like, and blah 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 blah. Make those type of detailed notes, so that way I can kind of formulate somewhat of a plan, maybe next year or later down the road, just to kind of get an idea. It's like, all right, I'm noticing I've been seeing deer with biometric pressure of this and blah, and stuff like that. That's something that I kind of been doing lately, and it sounds like something similar to what you're doing and making notes.
Yeah, I use DeerCast a lot for like the weather data and stuff. And I mean, I'm also quite a bit of a weather nerd. So I mean, I got like 6 weather apps, and I rifle through them all the time. And yeah, I take screenshots like you do, and like try to like put it all together, and like I'll go back and like I'll like basically, like I said, obsess over it. Be like, all right, it was this day, it was this time, the barometric pressure was 29.9, and there was a bit of a cold front moving through according to this weather app. And so it's like it's a little mad scientisty, but it was I'd never really had that many close encounters with bigger deer, up until the last like 5-6 years. And I mean, I had a 135-inch 8-pointer come in a handful of times, messed up on the shot on him one time, and then there was a bigger 10-point, probably about a 145, 150. He came in chasing a doe, and then that 8-pointer came in and bumped him out, and I was like, all right, well, this is kind of a crazy awesome morning, and so I'm like, I'm gonna make a mental note of that. This is a really cool spot. But yeah, it's a lot of the technical stuff. It's not just going out, sitting, and just kind of flipping the coin. I mean, there's days like that, obviously,
Right.
where it's, like, it's raining cats and dogs, and you're like, I'm stupid for being out here. But you'll see deer moving, and you're like, well, maybe I'm onto something. So it's kind of cool to be able to put all that together, and then try to make it so you're not out there just wasting your time.
Right.
We all have lives outside of hunting. We all have families and stuff like that too. So you want to make the most of the time that you get, and you don't want to just be burning PTO and stuff like that all the time. So you want to try and use it as efficiently as possible. And I think like the Onyx, the Deercaster weather apps, stuff like that, and trail camera usage has been like the real ticket for me.
Mike Sutherland made a comment here. I don't know how it sounds like a joke, I guess, but he says, how pivotal was the side mirrors of his Saturn to his early success?
I mean, it got me one, but I didn't recover him. I just got my license, and it was right outside. I was going to town, and I had a giant buck. I mean, it probably was 160s plus, and he came across the road, antlers down, and I was going a little too fast to be able to stop. And he ended up running into the side of my car, just cleaved that side mirror off, just took it clean off. And I mean, I whipped around. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that deer just did that to my car. I was pissed. I was 16. I was like, I just got a car. I'm like, sweet, man. And then this deer comes by and just trashed it. And I was like, oh man. So I whipped around, and I was like, hoping to at least find him, but no, he just disappeared like a ghost. It was out of there.
One thing though I kind of want to bring up here though is with e-scouting, and I think you can agree with this on me, but I think we can get sometimes too scientific with it. I've said this before in our episodes where we rely on that information too much. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's great information. I'm going to rely heavily on it, but at the same time, and I've used this example before because it happened to me countless times in the years past, where I was using one hunting app. I'm not going to say the brand, and it would say that I had a 90% chance of seeing a deer. So I'd go out there, hunt, thinking, all right, I'm going to see a deer. I got a great chance of getting a deer. Nope, didn't see jack shit.
Yeah.
Then I'd see one day it was like 3%. So, all right, I'm not going to go out there and hunt. I'm not going to burn my PTO. Next thing I know, my phone's blowing up with notifications of photos of deer. It's like, really? What? And at the same time, it's like I told myself that day with that 3%, I was like, my guts tell me to get out in the woods. So ever since that time, a couple of years ago, if my gut is telling me to get out in the woods,
You
get out in the woods, because at the end of the day, it's deer hunting. Like I said, sometimes we make it too complicated. We make it too scientific, too technical. Exactly. Analyze it too much. Just get out in the woods. These are just deer. And
Yep.
a guest I had on a couple weeks ago, and I've been saying it now because he made a great point of it. Yeah, these apps are taking all this weather data and giving you the great percentage, but they're not taking the external factors of what's your neighbor doing across the road. They might be doing something with their dogs and scaring deer away onto your property. You just never know.
Well, yeah. And not only that, like everything's property specific too. You know, if you got a bunch of rain and they say, oh, right after the rain, the deer are going to be out moving. Well, if you're in a low lying area and it's all flooded, you know, you're not going to see shit. You know, so I mean, you gotta kind of like take all of it in, but you really have to like use what you're seeing on the ground, and then like just it's not the e-scouting and the weather apps and stuff. That's not the linchpin. Like all it is just like a piece to the puzzle. You know, you got to use like what you're seeing out in the woods. You know, day in day out or whatever, and you know, couple that with possibly trail camera photos and stuff like that, daylight trail camera photos, because night photos don't do me shit.
Right.
Can't on them at night.
They
right?
just look fancy and night. Ooh, look pretty deer.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I got a picture of that big buck last night. Oh, doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. Like you're not gonna see them at night. You know, you can't. But it is hopeful to know that when you see that nighttime picture that maybe your target buck is still alive. That's about the only solace you could take out of it. But yeah, it's like you're saying, like the analysis paralysis. I'm guilty of it. With that Big 12, I was sitting there like, oh man, he's coming through every couple of weeks. He came through on the 28th of October last year, and then he came through again mid-November, and then he came through again late November, and then he like started to frequent the property even more towards like early mid-December, and then end of December he was just gone. I'm like, so I was like, I know I gotta, use my time wisely, and not leave a whole lot of scent out there and not make a lot of disturbance, like access the property the right way at the right wind. And, there's a lot of things. Like my wife, she even told me one time, she was like, just go out and go after him. Like, you're not going to get him if you're just sitting here thinking about it.
My wife said the same thing.
Yeah. And it's like, thank you. The voice of reason, right? It's like, obviously, it's easier said than done sometimes, because as hunters, sometimes we fear that we're going to mess it up so bad and we're going to blow an entire season. So it's kind of like that double-edged sword. Do I go? Do I don't? Do I stay home? And sometimes you need that helpful nudge to kind of be like, hey, just get out in the woods. Just be smart about it. Get out in the woods and get some eyes on what's moving, and then you got more information to put into that puzzle so you can get a clearer picture. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I really agree with you with the over analyzing of deer using all of the apps and stuff like that. I'm 100% guilty. I do it all the time. But I do like the e-scouting though. This last year, I did a lot of e-scouting in like southeast Minnesota, and they did like a CWD hunt down there. And I know like the special CWD hunts really aren't all that popular, but, especially here in Minnesota, there's a lot of people that, think that, the DNRs out there just like massacring the deer herd. And maybe not. I don't know. I don't work for the DNR, but, I was like, you know what? If I get an opportunity to pick up a gun mid-December and try to go chase a whitetail, like I'll try it. I'll give it a shot. So me and a buddy, we went down to southeast Minnesota on a whim on a Friday, and walked massive acreage and didn't see a single deer. But I think I picked the right property. It was like 57 degrees, no wind, and we were hunting in the bottom of a giant bowl. So I was assuming that, the deer were probably up top, and I was like, all right, well, try and like make my way up the edge of the bluff. I mean, I don't know. You said you wanted to hunt Minnesota. Southeast Minnesota is like bluff country, and it's It's not like South Central Minnesota where it's mostly ag land and river valleys around here. But Southeast Minnesota, it's bluff country, and it's tough walking. You got to be in shape for some of that stuff. And I found out real quickly I was not in shape. But I tried to get up to the top of the bluff so I could kind of get my eyes on, maybe deer hanging out on the edge of a field line or a wood line. Just being able to use the little bit of wind that there was to their advantage, because down in the bottoms it was just stale. There was nothing moving, and it was hot. I was sweating. I was like, this is horrible deer hunting weather, But saw all kinds of sign, and I mean the property just looked just absolutely killer. And I think this year this coming season I'm going to make a return trip down there, try and like maybe bow hunt it a couple of times or whatever before all the pressure sets in, and before everybody just kind of works their way through it. But I long story short, I didn't make it to the top of that bluff. Like I tried my damnedest, but I ended up sliding down like 200-foot bluff down to this little 2-track trail on my butt, and I hit the bottom. I hit that 2-track and made all kinds of ruckus, popped back up on my feet. I'm like, I'm not seeing a deer. I'm gonna keep walking. So I just kept on. I was like, I got another half mile to walk. Hopefully that sound didn't carry too far. But it was really killer looking ground. And I think Southeast Minnesota right now, we spoke about it a little bit earlier, that they're kind of getting to be. I mean, there's a lot of deer everywhere in southern Minnesota, but I think Southeast Minnesota has more of a caliber of a buck.
Danny Ertman here made a comment here. He said, what's your guys' opinions on the evolution of commercial box blinds?
I don't even hunt out of a box blind. I'm a hang on tree stand guy or a saddle hunter. I'll hunt off the ground occasionally, but I've never really hunted box blinds too much. I've taken my oldest boy out in a ground blind like one time, and he shot his deer first day opening youth season, first time out hunting. But other than that, like, I don't know, man. I know that there's a lot of benefits to the sound deadening, the scent, scent control and stuff like that. But to me, like, I don't know, I grew up, first time I ever went deer hunting, I went with my dad, and we wore those big poofy blaze orange like jumpsuits, the insulated jumpsuits, like a snowmobile suit.
Oh yeah.
We sat on the ground, and that's how I grew up hunting, was sitting on the ground. And it was just amazing to see that a deer could walk up 30 yards. I mean, hell, you couldn't even drive 30 yards past a deer without a deer looking at you and bolt into the woods. So I mean, to be able to sit on the ground and have a deer come that close, like, just that no barrier, like you're exposed, like you gotta really like mind your shit. You can't be out there moving, you can't be doing all kinds of stuff. So I find the challenge like really, really fun. But the ground blinds nowadays, man, or the box blinds rather, like it's insane. I mean, it's almost like hunting out of a house.
I don't know, I was just about to say, it's like the version of, like, how you call it, glamping camping style. In my opinion, it's the version of hunting in that version. There's nothing wrong with it, don't get me wrong, but that's just how my take is on it. And if you're out there hunting with box blinds, that's great. They have a lot of benefits from it, but personally, I agree with you. I like the challenge of it, and I feel more exposed, so I feel like I really got my P's and Q's of making sure I don't move constantly, this and that, and my scent isn't trapped in as much. And I've only hunted out of it twice now because it's on my neighbor's property. They have one. I like the evolution of themselves, from where they started to now. There's the technology in it. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
But I personally am not going to invest my money into one of those. Only because I'd much rather be out there, and I feel like you said, when I feel more exposed, I feel more at one with the deer when I'm out there hunting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's more.
I think
Me,
it's a personal
more like,
preference on how you want to
well,
attack
yeah.
that
I mean,
part.
no, exactly. I mean, it's no different than like the whole crossbow thing. Like that was a big debate in Minnesota this last year because they legalized crossbow for all of archery hunters, right? And I personally, like, I don't have anything against crossbows because I know eventually, like, I'm gonna get old. I'm not gonna be able to draw my
You
compound.
feel yes.
I know that that's just a fact of life, right? I'm gonna get old. I'm gonna have to pick up a crossbow. I mean, it's gonna fucking eat me alive, but I'm gonna have to do it, right? So
I
I don't
know.
have anything against.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. Darrin Davis, he made a comment here, and it caught me off guard. He said, "You feel the wind in your hair."
In your
Like,
beard.
yeah, not because I'm bald, basically.
Hey, you should see his picture, man. Like that's my brother.
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't have too much on you. Don't worry. But, but yeah, no. But yeah, the whole crossbow thing, man. Like that was a big debate in Minnesota last year, and a lot of people were pretty pissed off about it.
Because they got
And
legalized?
because they made them legal for anybody to use, right? So
Okay.
if you're an able-bodied man, and it's for the whole archery season from the mid-September all the way through December 31st, you can pick up a crossbow, which is essentially, I don't even want to call them a crossbow, call them a cross gun. So, I mean, it's got a buttstock. I mean, it's basically a gun that fires a bolt. That's
Right.
what it is. But, there was, like I said, I don't have anything against crossbows. I'm unfortunately going to have to pick one up eventually. I know that's just a fact of life. But I feel like, there with archery hunting, that's kind of like a barrier to entry. It's supposed to be challenging. That's the same thing with, hanging on the side of a tree or sitting on the ground or sitting in a saddle. It's supposed to be a challenge. You know, you, it's the same reason why you can't rifle hunt out of your pickup. You know, it's just those are gimmies.
I mean,
So
they're basic. You're shooting these crossbows out to 120 yards, and they're hitting penny-size dead ring circles. And if
over and over and over again.
exactly, in my opinion, like you said, hunting itself is supposed to be a challenge. I mean, I get we're trying to get people involved into hunting, but we're making it somewhat too easy. And hunting with a crossbow, in my opinion, the only time you should be hunting with a crossbow is if you physically cannot draw back a bow at all. And I
Yeah, like
think there's a huge controversy right now where crossbows should have their own dedicated season. So when you have these people that are out there hunting with guns and they are there, it's kind of taking them and they don't hunt with bows. They're giving now the option to hunt those deer with a crossbow now in archery season. So it's giving them a lot longer of a season.
yeah.
And Danny Ertman here says he made a comment saying, let me pull it up here for us. It says, do you think the crossbow law will help more weaker people get into the sport?
Weaker how? That's a joke. But no, but I think that if you're gonna hunt archery and you cannot physically draw a bow, I'm with you 100%. You cannot physically draw a bow, then pick up a crossbow. Like I jacked my shoulders up at work, and I was thinking about, going on disability and getting them fixed or whatever. But then I picked my bow up and I was still able to draw, and I was like, well, screw it. Like I'm just gonna hunt. Like as long as it doesn't mess with my hunting, I'm fine. I can still work, obviously. Like so if I can hunt, then I'm fine with it. But if it was gonna affect my hunting, then yeah, I was gonna go get it done. But I feel like if you're able to, then you should. It's just like, the kids that are just entering, the sport of hunting, let them use a crossbow just to get interested in it. Southern Minnesota, we have a shotgun season. We don't have a rifle season down here. So we have a 9-day shotgun season smack dab in the middle of the rut. And instead of giving my kid a shotgun and maybe scaring the crap out of him with the recoil and having him have to fight that battle, I gave him an AR pistol, chambered in 300 blackout. I was like, it'll be loud. I'm like, but he weighed at the time, I think it was like 65 pounds soaking wet in all his hunting gear. So he was a little bit of a string bean, but I was like, I don't want to shy him away from hunting. I don't want his first experience pulling the trigger on a gun to be anything other than enjoyable. And so I took him out, and we shot the AR pistol a little bit, and his first shot, his eyes got real big, and he looked at me. I was like, oh yeah, it's not a Nerf, it's a real gun, man. And he was just drilling him out to 75 yards. I was like, I feel confident that anything that I get in front of you, you're going to be able to hit.
Yeah.
And yeah, his first deer came out in front of that ground blind like 18 yards, and I was like, now remember, I'm like, you got him? He's like, yep. I reached over, clicked the safety off. I'm like, put that dot right behind his shoulder. You there? Yep. Okay, now remember, when you squeeze the trigger, squeeze it, don't pull. And I didn't even get the sentence out. Boom! What the hell was that? And I looked up, and I saw a little bit of dust kick up over the deer's back, and I was like, oh man, like he might have pulled it, And so we sat for an hour, and yeah, it ate him up sitting for that hour. And we went out and looked for blood. And he's like, if we don't find anything, can I still shoot a deer? I'm like, we got to make sure that you missed completely. Mm-hmm. And I started looking around, and I found this big pool of blood. I was like, you smoked him, dude. You got him. I'm like, he's like, all right, well, let's go get him. I'm like, let's not. I'm like, let's back out. Like, because the blood it looked like, maroon pudding. Like, it was real thick, real dark. I was like, it kind of looked like a liver shot. So I'm like, we're going to back out, and we're going to go mess around in town for a little bit, get some breakfast, and we'll come back out later, and we'll look for this deer. And I mean, that deer went like 375 yards, but we found him. And he's like, did you see any blood up ahead? I'm like, no. Like, but I got one better for you. I'm like, look across the ravine. He looked over, he's like, oh my God. I was like, yep, you smoked him. He was ready to run over there. I'm like, hold on. Let's make sure he's dead. Let's not run up on him. But yeah, he was pumped. And honestly, like, that was probably my favorite hunt that I've been on in so long. It was just taking him out, so I'm all for getting new people in and like seeing the wonder and amazement, the excitement on their face. Like, that to me is like, just, you can't beat that, right? Like, no. You can't buy that. You can't bottle it. Like, it's something that, is just, unreplaceable. So that was really cool. But
I don't think necessarily the crossbows themselves will help get more people into the sport. I think it's a good, maybe if they put some type of regulations more on it. But I think if you it's a great maybe starting, quote unquote, starter kit to get people out in the woods to kind of build their confidence in hunting and themselves. Because I can see if you don't have like a mentor or someone, you're just kind of going all out on your own, and you're bringing your bow, and I can see your encouragement kind of just crumble right away if you fail. But I mean, that's the point of hunting. I mean, you're going to have your ups and downs, so you got to use that as motivator. But if you don't have that ability to kind of take that moment and fail and want to succeed better at it, but if you want to just kind of get your feet wet and see what it's like to hunt, then I think a crossbow might be a great way to go about it.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
Brian, your brother says here, he made a comment that says crossbows seem more of a transition weapon, and I agree with that.
Yeah, I think maybe like, if for a first time hunter, I'm not, like I said, don't work for the DNR, but like maybe like for a first time hunter, like you get like 2-3 years with a crossbow tag, just so that you can kind of get your feet wet, and then it's almost like a learner's permit.
Yeah,
I mean, it's called deer hunting, it's not deer harvesting.
Exactly.
So it's just like fishing. You go fishing, it's called fishing, not catching. So if you don't catch anything, you can't be pissed off. It's just like, it's part of the game that we play. So,
and I've said this story before, where my very first deer going out hunting with my dad, he wanted to make sure that he was with me. So my stand was like 20 yards away from his. We both literally can see each other. We can throw a stick at each other. We're that close. I shot my first deer. I was 12 years old. I shot right underneath the doe, and I started bawling my eyes out. And my dad comes down, picks up my arrow, starts climbing up my tree stand, and he says, "Why are you crying?" I said, I've been practicing since I was like 7 years old, and I've been living up for this moment, and I failed." He's like, "Well, that's bow hunting, and that's hunting in general, so you gotta get used to it." So I
Right.
told my dad, he's like, "All right, I'm not gonna let that shit happen again." And I made a point to myself was I'm never gonna miss another deer. Granted, it's bow hunting, so you're gonna miss the deer.
Yeah.
I missed my deer. I missed deer after since then, but I made it a goal was I'm gonna do my best to never miss another deer. So next week I made sure to I'm outside shooting my bow constantly, repetition. Next thing I know, I see this nice little 4-point come through, and I shoot him, and he dies. So I use that failure as a motivator to do better.
Yeah. And honestly, like that's a big thing with just anything in life, right? You use your failure as fuel. Every time you screw up, every time you drop the ball, every time you fail, you got to pick your ass up and you got to get back after. Otherwise, why do it?
Exactly.
I mean, I got kids that are in baseball, and seeing their teammates and stuff. Excuse me, seeing their teammates and stuff, they'll strike out and they hang their head, and it's like, dude, like, just so you know, like in the majors, the pros, the guys that make millions of dollars, like they go 1 for 3 and they're the goats. They're the best of all time. They strike out 2 out of every 3 at bats. So, I guarantee you're going to strike out, but it's just what you do with it. You can't let those moments define you, but you can use them as building blocks for the future.
I always tell myself if I fall, I pray I fall on my back, because if I can look up, I can get up.
Right? Damn right, man.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you kind of touched on like the failing at hunting and like making it want you to be better. Like I was telling you before the show, like the buck that you used for the thumbnail on the YouTube, that deer he wrecked me. He wrecked me. Like he ruined me for so long. Like I wasn't even able to draw on a deer without shaking like a leaf. That buck, it was a South Dakota buck, and he came in and I saw him walking in. I was ready. I was pumped. The year prior, I shot like 143-inch 10-point, and this year this buck came in, and I was like, oh, we're gonna do it 2 years in a row, man. All right. This deer comes in and he walks behind a tree, and I was gonna use this tree to conceal my draw because I'm hanging on the side of the tree, with nothing in between me and him except for this one lone tree sitting out there. So I draw, and this deer stops behind the tree and hangs up for like 3 to 5 minutes. And I'm just sitting there at full draw, like, come on out. The second you come out, I'm going to smoke you. And like 3 to 5 minutes in, I'm like, shit, I got to let down. I let down. And the second I let down, that deer comes moving. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, all right, there's another tree. And he walks behind it. Same story. I draw back. He holds up behind the tree and is sitting there eating acorns. I'm just like, are you kidding me, man? I'm like, you're killing me here. And that deer hung out for like 4 minutes, and I was just like, dear God, and then I let down again. The deer comes walking out, and I was like, I'm not making that mistake again. I'm going to draw on him out in the open, set my pin, and let this thing go. So the deer comes into like 35 yards. I draw, and the arrow pulls out of the nock. The nock pulls out of the arrow. Nock stays on the string, of course, but I get to full draw, and my arrow clangs on my riser, and it's held up by my arrow rest. And the deer stops dead, looks up at me, and here I am at full draw with a plastic nock stuck to my string. I'm like, how much worse could this get? And he sat there and he stared me down for what felt like an eternity. It's probably like 2-3 minutes, but I'm sitting there at full draw after being at full draw 2 previous times with very little break in between. And he's just got me dead to rights, just pegged. And I'm like, and so finally, like after a few minutes, he drops his head, starts eating. I let down, and I'm distraught. I'm shaking like hell. I get the arrow back on the nock, and I sky draw, and I drop my pin down on him, and I didn't wait. I just set it right behind his shoulder. He was at like 30 yards, And I squeezed, I let it off. I watched that arrow bury behind his shoulder, and he tore the hell out of there. And funny story, my brother, Brian, he was actually posted up about 85 yards from me watching this whole drama unfold. And he's basically like, why the hell aren't you shooting? Why the hell aren't you shooting? You know, and I'm like, dude, I can't. Like, he's got me dead. But yeah, that deer ended up running underneath him, and we were out on public. So like he ended up putting 2 more arrows in this deer to keep it from, you know, running and us having to drag a deer, you know, half mile plus through thick grass shit back to the truck. So he ended up shooting this deer twice. And after I shot, I hung my bow up and I sat down there, and I'm just like, just convulsing in the tree, like shaking every last leaf off of there. And it took everything I had to bring my binos up to watch this deer go underneath my brother. And I'm just sitting there like trying to brace myself up against the tree and, you know, to steady myself. And I see him draw, and I'm like, what the heck? And I see him shoot. I'm like, what the hell? And then I see him draw again. I see him shoot. I'm like, I pull my phone. I'm like, stop shooting my damn deer. You know, I'm getting this thing mounted, man. What are you doing? You're wrecking that cape. But, you know, he was telling me after we got down and we met up, he was like, yeah, he's like, you know, your deer last year ran, my deer last year ran. I'm like, yep, no, that makes sense. Complete sense. Like, let's just drop them in their tracks if we can and keep them close to the truck as possible. But team effort, right?
Right.
But yeah, that deer, ever since then, you know, it's been a big uphill climb to kind of like settle myself in and be able to like just control my breathing, you know. Like the target panic that set in, you know, after like you know, being at draw 3 times and then finally like focus, you know, draw back and let it go. Like that wrecked me, man. And it's been a tough hill to climb to come back from that. But like, the only way you can is, you know, just getting after it, putting more arrows in deer, you know.
Mental focus and mental strength, really, it's at the end of it, and just constantly just staying at the grind of it. And I've been there too. I mean, I've had my deer where I was like, and yeah, it just, I mean, it happens to the best of them, and it's the best thing that you can really do is like you're evidence of just sticking with it and fighting through it and just making sure to repetition, and getting better at it. And I noticed while you're staying at your story there, Mike here made a comment saying, "Not gonna lie, bud, the internet makes your Minnesota accent super evident."
You betcha. Don't you know?
I kid you not. I went up to the UP once. I mean, I grew up in the UP, and next thing I know, I was up there for a week last year, I think. Next thing I know, I'm starting, "Hey, what's up, buddy? Hey, how's it going? Hey." Not
All
to
better,
be
Kenny.
stereotypical or anything, but I started getting that accent of the UP up there, and I was like, I get home, my wife's like, "Why do you have an accent?" I'm like, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to have one."
Sorry about that. You
Exactly.
know? Yeah, man. Yeah, you go up north Minnesota, it gets real thick up there. But yeah, it's, you know, it's everybody in Minnesota has that, the O's. We got
Uh,
O's. Oh man, it's brutal. It's brutal. But yeah, you know, Michigan, you know, you guys, like we were talking earlier, like you guys have like made a lot of strides coming back from, you know, the decimation of the whitetail herd. And like basically from everything that I've heard from, you know, people on podcasts and, you know, their firsthand hunting experience in Michigan, you know, over like the last 10 years is that it went from like spikes and forks and stuff like that to now they're seeing like basket bucks and even like a couple 120s, 130s and stuff like that. So like that's really cool to see that you guys are, you know, coming back from that and, you know, getting a more quality deer herd. Because I think, you know, we talked about like getting people into the sport, right? You know, you can go out and shoot a button buck or a fork or a spike or whatever, and that's cool, right? You know, that's awesome. For a kid, you really don't give a shit. You know, you're just like, man, I got a deer. And when I was a kid, like you had to take your deer into a registration station, and you had to like, you know, you go to a locker or a DNR check station or whatever, and you had to like physically take your deer there, somebody would come out and look at it and they'd be like, hey, you got a deer? That is so cool, man. And they would hype you up. And it was like the best feeling. You felt like the king of the world. Like, I got a deer. Like, there's so many people that eat tag soup out here. I wasn't one of them. I was successful, you know, and you, as a kid, you get that. And you're just like, that kind of like hooked me, you know. It was like, man, like getting respect from these old timers that have been out here freezing their ass off, you know, and they're, you know, complete strangers, but they're pumped for you. Right. So it's more like that community aspect. But like, you know, if you want to really get somebody hooked on hunting, throw a 150, 160 in front of them. And whether they shoot it or whether they miss, like, they're never going to forget that. You know, they're going to have nightmares about that damn deer. I know I had nightmares about big bucks that I miss, you know, they haunt me, man.
They
So
do.
it's like, yeah, they do. And, you know, but it's what keeps you coming back for more. You know, it's almost like an addiction. You know, it's really like, it's such a fun hobby, and it's such a cool way to like connect with nature and like de-stress from work and life and all the bullshit. But it's also like something that really like trips my trigger and like gets me like ramped up. You know, I could be driving somewhere where I know I have zero chance of getting permission. You know, absolutely no chance, you know. And I look out in the field and I see a 170 walking across the field. I'm like, oh, skirt. And, you know, I lock the brakes up, pull out the binos, and, you know, I'm like, I just got to get eyes on it, you know. And, you know, it's a really cool thing, you know. And every chance I get, you know, if I'm with the kids and I see a deer, I'm like, well, wait, look over there, look over there, look over there, you know. And, you know, just trying to, you know, get them involved in it, because, you know, every once in a while I'll be driving along and, you know, one of them will point out, hey, there's a deer over there. And I look and I'm like, oh, no shit. I'm like, that's like a 110-inch 8-pointer. Like, that's a good find. You know, it's like, and it's cool, you know, that they're out there looking for that kind of stuff, you know. And so I do think that, you know, getting a better quality deer herd, you know, having 150s and 160s is great. But if you only have like, you know, 6 deer in a square mile, it kind of sucks. But if you have plentiful deer herd and you have a good quality deer herd, you know, that's going to bring, you know, hunters out of the woodwork. You know, it'll bring hunters in from out of state. You know, look at Iowa, you know.
I think
I mean,
it. Oh, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
oh, no, I was gonna say, I mean, even like South Dakota, like Wisconsin, they've got, you know, a huge deer herd as well. And I don't know about the rack size for Wisconsin, but like I said, I know Southeast Minnesota is like, you know, looking pretty good. You know, I think over the last, was it like 25, 30 years, like the majority of the Boone and Crockett bucks have come from Southeast Minnesota. So it's it's a cool thing. I mean, and down there you can kill 5 deer, you know. So I mean, you want to talk freezer fillers, like
Right.
you can fill your freezer, your neighbor's freezer. Like 5 deer is a lot of meat. You know, that's a lot of meat. But
Right.
you know, it's really cool to see that the numbers are there to be able to like sustain that type of like harvest management. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to last, but, you know, I know, like we were talking before the show, like where I'm at, you know, when I started hunting, it was doe or buck only, excuse me, it was buck only, and you had to apply for a doe permit. And we had a 6-day gun season, and it was 2 days on the first weekend and 4 days on the second weekend. And you could go all 6, but you'd have to spend more money. And it was like very rare, you know, very rarely do people get the multi-buck license and do both seasons. You know, it was basically you pick one, you know, your neighbor or whoever else is out on the property has the other weekend. And, you know, you just kind of sit your 2 days or your 4 days and then you're done. And, you know, you were lucky to see a big buck. You know, we saw all kinds of does, but, you know, if you didn't get a doe permit, you know, if you were new to hunting, you automatically got a doe permit, you know, as a kid. But, you know, after I think you turned, I think it was like 16 or whatever, then that was out the window. And now you join the ranks of the big boys having to shoot bucks. So you got to make sure you got 3 inches of antler. Otherwise you're going to get in trouble from Mr. Green Jeans, you know?
Right.
And, yeah, it was a completely different environment back then. But now, last year, 2 years ago, where I'm at, we went to either sex, and then last year we went to a 2 deer zone. So the DNR must be doing some kind of audit with their harvest or scouting or something to ramp that up. I mean, to be able to, to have those numbers be sustainable. I mean, if you drive around, end of December, early January, you can kind of see evidence that the deer herd is pretty massive just by looking at
Yeah.
the ditches. So,
I-
it's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I'm not going to get too much into how our state is running our DNR, because if you want to know my opinion on that, just go watch our last episode. But basically, in a short version of it, it's just going down the crapper basically. And we're basically, when you see that red light in your gas tank saying you need gas blinking, yeah,
Yeah.
we're like at that. Like we need. It's just so many things need to happen here in Michigan. We need to do better at. And our head people in Lansing, they don't want to listen to us, basically. And there's a comment here, and he says, "Do I believe in unicorn properties?"
Do I believe, or do you?
Me, if I believe in unicorn properties.
Oh, well, I mean, I believe that there are some unicorn properties, um, like my brother used to hunt a couple unicorn properties, and then when he lost permission for those, he had to join the ranks of the rest of us schlubs and go and hunt reality. I mean, he was out there seeing 160s, 170s and stuff, and he was doing pretty good. He would take me out and we would go scouting every once in a while. I saw biggest whitetail of my life in Minnesota with my brother, and that was on his unicorn property. And it's one of those things where, if you're lucky enough to get into one of those, or if you have permission and you can make it into something like that just by selective management, if you're not out there just piss pounding every kind of thing with four legs that walks, and you're hunting it smart, you can build the equity of the property over time as far as hunting goes.
I think a lot of that comes down to mainly of how are you preparing your land and managing it over time. And that leads into someone else here that made a comment here. He wants to know, he says, it's Danny that made a comment here. He's saying, how are you guys preparing your land to hold deer or make them want to be there? You want me to go first on that, or you want to go first, Danny?
You go first, man.
I don't do basically anything on our property where I hunt, because first off, I'm on the neighbor's property, so I have to always ask permission if I want to cut down just a leaf, basically. I have permission to cut. I have permission to do stuff, but it's my respect thing out of him. He's allowed me to hunt on his property, so I just ask him to do before I do anything.
Yeah.
My mentality is when it comes to hunting, and this is going to be my first year actually trying to do something different, where we're going to be putting in a food plot. We're going to be starting that process this year, some watering holes, stuff like that. But for me, my main thing is I try to do as least as possible where I hunt, because I like the challenge of it's wit versus wit. And I try to figure out where these deer are moving on the property. How are they moving from A to B? Where are they traveling? When are they traveling? And stuff like that. And if I can beat them by basically doing nothing, so that deer that's on the intro here for the host is me. I didn't do shit. I didn't. I cut down a tree for a shooting lane. That was it. But I know this year that's going to be something different, because I do want to see how I can hold them more on our land. And I think if you have a piece of property, no matter how big it is, you need to know that land inside and out. And first, learn it the best you can before you start looking at other pieces of land around it. Figure out what your pros and cons are on it. And then you can start moving around in a circle of what's surrounding your property and figuring out what the pros and cons of that neighboring property is. So, for instance, and I'm going to make this quick, the pro that's on our property, we have a ton of cover, we have a ton of bedding area. so they feel safe and secluded in our area. The con with our property is we have a giant 40-acre food plot, but that's at the very north end of the property, so they have to travel basically on the west side of it just to get there. Everything around us, the pro for them is they have a bunch of food, and it's just like everyone else in the area. It's a bunch of corn or soy. The bad thing with them, they don't have cover. So they have to stay on our land for covering, bedding, stuff like that, and move on to their ones. So that's how I look at it. I'm trying to figure out how I can manage our property better for more bedding. That's mainly what I'm looking at.
Yep. Yeah. Honestly, like, I think the best way, I mean, aside from, obviously what the Drurys do, right? I mean, if you got an unlimited bankroll, you can make, a parking lot a deer haven. But I'm right there with you, man. Like, I throw out mineral lick early in the spring, early summer, or late spring, early summer. Throw some mineral lick out. Trophy Rock and Lucky Buck sponsor me. But no, I do that, and then I basically set up trail cameras. But the biggest thing I don't know about attract the deer to your area, because around here there's so much hunting pressure everywhere, right? So I think the biggest thing is just not bumping them out. Don't push them somewhere else. If you can, like you're saying, like, you got to look at your piece of land and you learn the pros and cons, but you also got to look how those deer use that property. You got to see how this goes back to the analysis paralysis shit, right?
Yeah.
But you got to see how they're using it in a certain wind. Like the property that I shot that 150, that big 12 off of, it's 40 acres, and there was like 15, 20 acres that I never even stepped foot on hunting in like the 7 years that I hunted. I never went up, it was on the other side of this creek. It was basically an ag field. The ag field looked like Squidward's nose, kind of going from, the northwest down to the southeast. Well, here in Minnesota in the fall and wintertime, like, that's predominantly our main wind is a northwest wind. So no matter how you access that property, you're kind of screwed, because that wind's going to be at your back, blowing your scent in there. So you either have to go in on a really calm morning, and that has its drawbacks as well, right? Because it's going to be calm. Every boot step, every little leaf of, corn that you step on is going to sound like Sasquatch coming out of the fucking woods. So you got to, like, take your time, but you also got to be quick about it at the same time to get back there and not let too much scent linger. So it was a hard property to hunt. But once you get back in there and you're tucked in, I mean, sit down for 4 hours and let some of that scent clear out, and then you can see some of these deer. So in the mornings when I would hunt, I would go out like an hour and a half before shooting light, and I would want to be in my stand, and then just let everything kind of like die down, and just like forget that I was even there. It's like, yeah, forget this fat dude walking down the field, swishing and stomping and, tripping over dirt clods, just wait, get out there early enough. But yeah, I think a lot of it was like, just hunt the property smart, so you're not kicking those deer off. Because I noticed early on when I hunted that property, I made a lot of mistakes. I would walk in, and I would walk the wood line on the north side. And I was thinking, I can let most of my scent drift across this open field, and then it would kind of dissipate a little by the time it gets down to that the tip of Squidward's nose, And the thing is like, those deer, they would bed on the north side, just inside the woods, 30 yards in. So I'd walk that wood line, and they would all catch my silhouette walking and blow out in pitch black, scare the shit out of me. And then for the next week and a half, 2 weeks, I saw very minimal deer. So what I did is I ended up walking down the dead center of that field, to try and like keep a silhouette from, going right next to the woods, right where they're bedding. Because I mean, depending on the wind, they would bed on the north side or they would bed on the south side. But I knew, like, once I could get all the way in the back, that they typically didn't bed in the back, not in the mornings anyways. They would sometimes midday. But when I got in the back, I felt like I was safe. Like, if I got back there and I didn't hear a deer blow, I was like, it's going to be a good morning, man. Like, here we go. But I mean, it was like, I think from wood line to wood line was like maybe 100 yards, 100, 120 yards. So I had to like split the difference and just hoof my ass out there as quick as I could. There was times in the late season where I would kind of like shy to the southern side with the north wind, because those deer, they really weren't, the property that I was hunting was only 40 acres, and it was more of like a transitional property anyways. Like they would bed down, like the does and fawns would bed down, and the bucks would just come through looking for does and fawns occasionally. I'd catch them early season out there picking on, some of the bean tops, but other than that, it was basically like, during the rut, or a little bit of late season action, a little bit leftover food or whatever sitting out in the field, corn or soybeans or whatever. But they really wouldn't, like, it wasn't their home. They would kind of just transition through. So it was a lot of basically like just playing it out and trying to be at the right place at the right time with the right wind. It's and not only that, but like I was saying, like, not screwing it up, not pushing everything out.
Just being tactical with it, basically.
Yeah, I mean, deer are not stupid. I mean, we all know that. They are just a dumb animal, right? But they
are dumb when they just look at me when I'm driving down the road and they're just like, "Hey,
it makes you
what are
think
you?
that,
Oh, bright lights! Wow!"
Yeah, it makes you think
right in front of you.
Bullshit, right? 120 years of cars driving down the roads and not a single one's gotten the hint yet.
Yeah,
But
no kidding.
but yeah, no, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, you got to be smart about it, because those animals, they are built for survival. They're not going to give you too many chances. If you threaten them, they're gonna find some place where they feel safe. So I wanted to make sure that where I was felt like the safest place. If I had a doe come over and blow at me and sit there and stomp, yeah, I wanted to shoot her in the face. I was like, get away from me, stop, but at the same time, I would just try and like slink back in the tree and just be like, just go away. Just go away. I'm not a threat to you. I'm like, if I was, you already have an arrow in you. Just go, and, eventually, things would settle down. But, if you can, I think, like I said, I think a lot of it is if you can work that property and hunt it in a smart way, you're going to end up having more deer there, because, I mean, your neighbors might not be doing the same thing. The guy 2 parcels over might not be doing the same thing. They might bump a conga line of deer, half mile, a mile away, all the way to your property, because you got deer there that are hanging out chilling, while every other deer in the Tri-County area is just getting chased down by, everybody with a gun and a stick and a string. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is like just trying to hunt smart and like not mess it up. And that's a huge challenge.
I think, I mean, there's you always had that conversation of, well, I got to hunt here because I have a west wind or an east wind or blah blah blah. I'm not saying I disagree with that, but I think at the same time, these mature deer, unless you're after a specific deer and the area that he's coming from, majority of the time, and I'm just going off my own personal history and stuff like the experiences. The deer are smart, but the deer here in Michigan, they're 2 years old, but they're acting like 6-year-old deer. But they
know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two.
Exactly. And then, sorry, I was reading a comment there, and I'll get to that in a second. And I was basically, if you have a west wind and you're not going to hunt a certain stand because of a certain wind, okay, fine. But at the same time, these deer are deer. They're smart, and they can come from any freaking direction, man. I don't care. I've seen deer where I've had this one deer that I was after for a while, and I saw him. I predicted him mainly to come from the west. All right, I got west wind. Nope. Next thing I know, he's coming way northeast, coming right at me. Nope. Next time you know, the wind blows me away. I'm like, you just, at the end of the day, like I said earlier in the show, is it's deer hunting. Trust your gut. The deer are smart. They're going to do what they want to do, and they can come basically in any direction that they want. And your
I mean,
brother
I've even
knows
set up with the deer coming in straight downwind to me, and it was one of those things where I knew that there weren't going to be a lot of deer that day, but I knew that the deer that did come in were going to be shooters. So actually that big 12 that I shot, he came in and he was dead downwind of me, 8 yards, and I'm up 30 feet in a tree, so I don't think my scent was really getting there. But I mean, he was dead downwind of me, and it was one of those things. I also had a muzzle loader, makes it a little easier. But I mean, 8 yards with a bow would have been, that would have been glory.
Right.
But it was one of those things where I've set up to where I'm like, if I go into a situation like that where I know that these deer are probably going to come in downwind to me, I have my head on a swivel and I have my bow in my hand, and I'm not screwing around. Like, it's business time. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen fast. I'm going to have to get drawn, and they're probably going to be looking at me sketched out, already smelling me. But you got to get that. If it's going to happen, you're going to have to do it quick. So I've had, I've actually done the dumb thing and set up with the wind blowing to where I think the deer are going to come in. And I mean, it can be successful, but like I said, you got to have a different kind of mentality. You can't just go out and be like, well, I got a perfect wind. It's blowing down over this creek, and there's no deer that are going to be coming in, so I can kind of just sit back and get a little lax. And I mean, who knows? I mean, you could have a deer walk right up underneath you and bust you when you reach for your bow and put your release on. But yeah, it's a crazy thing, and there's just so many variables, and that's one of the really cool things about deer hunting is that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And there's just infinite numbers of ways to be successful deer hunting. Yeah, there's some that are more reliable than others, but like you said, trust your gut. There was times where I went out hunting and I knew that I was going to see deer, and I saw all kinds of deer. And then there was times where I sat back. It was just this last Thanksgiving, and I was like, man, I wish I was out there this morning. And I went to Thanksgiving dinner, and right as we sat down to eat, I got a cell camera update on my phone, and that big 12 was sitting on my camera right 15 yards in front of my stand. And I was like, I knew I should have been out there. I'm like, but then I would be missing Thanksgiving. I'm like, it's like, I'd rather be at Thanksgiving, but I'm like, it's cool to see that deer, and it's cool to know that my hunch or my gut was right. So you're 100% on that. Trust your gut.
Yeah. Your brother here made a comment here. He says, gotta give the buck just enough to make him feel comfortable to move.
Yeah. You don't want to you don't want to overpressure. You don't want to overhunt. Right. But then again, you don't want to never be in there, because if you're never there, you're never going to, have an opportunity to hunt. You can't kill them from the couch. But,
well, and one thing this year that I'm actually going to be trying, I'm going to be trying it for at least 3 to 5 years, because I'm curious to see if my idea is going to work, and I can't just go off of 1 year of a sample basis. And basically what I'm going to be doing is taking one of my hunting shirts and putting it up in my tree stand, and multiple of them. I'm thinking I got 5. I got more than 5, but I'm thinking about putting in at least 5 and seeing, because I live in a neighborhood. So long story short, I just want to see if the deer get comfortable with my scent out there. So that way when I do actually get out there, they're not spooked. They're not like, oh, what's that new scent? I don't like it. And I'm constantly looking around. So they kind of feel somewhat.
Put your shirt on a mannequin and stick that thing up in a tree.
That's the plan. Throw a scarecrow up there with the shirt, so that way they get a picture of the silhouette, and they got my scent up there, and That way, when I'm actually out there, they're like, "Oh, that's nothing new. I'm used to that. All right, I feel comfortable."
It's
And
a
bam,
similar
next thing you know, I'm
tactic
putting
when
an
you're
arrow in them.
Well, that's a similar tactic to setting up a ground blind. Usually you don't just pop up a ground blind like the morning you're going to go hunt. Usually you go out there, a few days, or I go out a few weeks beforehand, set it all up, brush it in, and then let it sit, so that the deer
Mhm.
get used to it, the scent goes away and all that. But yeah, plus if you get a handful of mannequins, I mean, you could always take a carpool in.
Yeah, exactly. That's my plan too. So it helps me get you out there quicker.
Right? That's a solid choice right there. But yeah, no, I've thought about that. Like leaving. Like I got a big hunting pack, and I thought about like leaving my hunting pack in the tree overnight, or like during the day. Like if I leave to go home, and I'm gonna be back out either that night or the next morning. Just leave all my hunting crap out there, and that way all I gotta do is grab my bow and my binos, my rangefinder, and I got my pack with my calls and all that stuff in it, sitting in the tree as like just some familiarity. Kind of like what you're saying, like let them get used to it, so that way when you know my big ass is sitting up in a tree and I got my big backpack, it's not two giant lumps sticking off the side. you know, they're like, oh, that other giant lump, that's fine. It's that we're cool with that one.
Right.
Yeah, I wonder if that would work.
Well, actually, Danny Ertman here in Mid County says they absolutely do get used to it. Socks and ball caps are great for getting sent there as well. So
Well, I
it
mean,
works, and I can't wait to go do it now.
well, yeah, but I mean, I think that would be something that you would have to do like year round, and you would almost have to go out there and like refresh, like
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna just put it out there for the hunting season. I'm like next
yeah,
weekend
like
we're
fill
going
it
out
out.
there and start moving tree stands, and the next weekend's gonna be the time where I start putting that stuff up there.
Because I know, like the deer, like they get used to farm equipment, stuff like that, pretty easily.
Exactly, that's where I got the idea from. I was
Yep.
like, they get used to walking, farmers, they get used to walking through neighborhoods, and I can step out in my backyard, and there's 5 does 5 yards from me, and they just look at me.
Oh, I used to work for a landscaping company, and my boss, he had like 65 apple trees, and he had a doe, and she would year after year she would have twins, and this doe basically lived on his like 5 acres. She never left, and like super relaxed environment, no pressure, nobody ever hunted her, and she would just live there. And I was out in his, the back part of his property, getting rid of some like lawn clippings or whatever, and I saw her giving birth to a doe or to a fawn. And I was like, God, that's a neat sight. And she didn't even care. She didn't care I was there. And I was like, this is like a really cool thing. And I would try to go out and feed them apples by hand. You can't get too close to a doe with little ones. She'll start stomping. And I'm like, I don't want to get hoofed, man. I'm like, oh, here's your apple. I toss it at her feet. And I'm like, I'm good. I'll back up. But I ended up I took her. I harvested her one year because she came up. She started eating the expensive landscaping shrubs that my boss had around his house. He was like, "That's it. She's done. Get her out of here." I was like, "Yes, sir. Can do." I'm like, yeah. And it's kind of funny because that year, my brother, he entered a big buck contest at our local archery shop, and I entered the big buck and the big doe. Like we both entered it. He took the big buck contest, and I took the big doe contest by weight with that doe.
Oh,
And
wow.
she field dressed like 145. And it was, I want to say it was early October. I think it was early October when I took her. But yeah, we took the back straps out and cooked them up on the grill. And I will tell you, basically a domestic deer that's been apple fed its entire life is delicious meat. Like it was the best venison I've ever had in my entire life. It was like applewood smoked venison on a grill. Like it was
Huh.
hands down just absolutely amazing. And I mean, I know sometimes you hear stories about guys that harvest deer up north in Minnesota that oh, my deer tastes like pine needles or whatever. I'm like, oh man, that sucks. Like I had that applewood smoked doe. I'm like, she was delicious, man. If I could have every animal like that, that's like pre-marinated. It was just killer. But yeah, that was I I think that your plan might work. If you get out there and you stay diligent with it, you know, persistence always pays off.
Right.
So I mean, I think the more you stick to it, the more you kind of, play with it and like figure out, what's the comfortable level. Like if you start seeing a deer just blow out of there, like maybe maybe you shouldn't go to the gym before you hang those clothes out,
Right.
or something. Just like put them on and then wear them out there and then take them off and change right out in the woods or something like. But yeah, if you're blowing deer out, then maybe it's a little too strong. But I mean, it'd be a hell of a way. I don't, like I said, I'm kind of a hunter without a home this year. Um, you know, so I'm going to be doing a lot of public stuff, and
Mm.
I don't think I can pull that off on
Yeah,
public, man. I think
that'd
the
be
second
something
they see a
different.
truck pull into that access, they're going to be like, "I'm out of here, man." So yeah, it's you gotta pick your battles, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting year, I think. But I think it'd be really cool to go out and take one on public.
Your brother Brian here made a comment asking, "What are your thoughts on shooting does before the rut? I'm against shooting does before the rut due to the scent and disturbing the area leading up to the rut."
That's always a hard one, man. Like
It is.
it is, you want those does around because I mean you know, that's your shiny object for them bucks to come. You know, I'm a mechanic, so I mean, I got tool trucks coming and they got shiny stuff on there all the time. Like that's how they get us, shiny objects. So you get a doe out during the rut, that's your tool truck pulling up, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll come on, $50 a month for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it's a tough call. I mean, I guess it really depends. Like what I try to do is like I try to hunt multiple properties too. Like I try not to put all my eggs in one basket. Like I'll bebop around public lands, like a bunch of different public lands and stuff like that. I even had permission for like 10 acres of virtually residential, and I was able to harvest the doe out of there. Um, so I mean, if you can like spread your pressure out, you know, and take does out of an area where you're not after, a giant buck or something like that. That would be that'd be way more preferential than, you know, trying to, harvest a doe and harvest a big buck, out of the same piece of property or even the same stand. That's a tough one.
Yeah, when it comes to shooting does, I'm not gonna lie, I've shot about 2 does in my 18 years of hunting, haven't recovered any of them. So I've yet to ever put my tag on a doe. And
Sometimes
that's
the
like
does are
it
harder, man.
they are, they're fucking Einsteins, man. I don't care what you say, they are geniuses. I don't care what you have to say.
But
Anyways,
I think a
I
lot of that. Real quick, I think a lot of that comes down to like we were talking like back in the day in Minnesota, it was buck only, and you had to apply for a doe permit. I think the average age of a deer in Minnesota is like 2.5 years. 2.5 years, and if you look, like 2.5 years is not a good representation. Well, how about the average age of a buck in Minnesota? You're probably down to a year and a half, a year. You know, bucks, they do not make it very long. It's brown is down, can't eat the antlers, but the spikes and the forks get just blown away all the time during slug season. And the 2.5 year average is because they're calculating does in. And then does are like 6, 7 years old. I mean, they're ancient. They got the long nose on them. They've had fawn after fawn after fawn, sometimes twins or triplets. Like they're seasoned. You know, they're not dumb because they've been around. And if you could take an old doe out, I'd say that's a hell of an accomplishment because a 7-year-old doe is going to be a hell of a lot more wily and wary than a 2.5-year-old buck. You know, that she's just like you were saying, those Michigan deer, the 2.5 years old, but they act like 6-year-old deer. Like they know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two. They've been hunted season after season after season, and they've seen the pressure in the woods. They've seen everything. So you're not going to pull a fast one on an old wise doe. You know, a lot of times, like, the biggest thing that we have going for us during the rut is the bucks. They stop giving a shit. They're not thinking. They're after one thing and one thing only. So if you can catch them slipping in that short window, then that's going to be your biggest chance of success. But a doe, like, man, they don't have that. They're tough. So I mean, if you can get on a big old doe, like, kudos. Like, that's sometimes I've tried to take does. Like, I've tried, and I'll don't even get drawn back all the way. I'm like quarter draw, and they're like stomping and blowing, and they're busting out, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, you're 65 yards away. Like, you were walking in, like, minding your own business, and you picked up a little bit of movement through the brush, and you're just like, nope, not going there. So it's like, it's a tough thing to do. But yeah, the biggest thing we got going for us with bucks is just they stop thinking. They don't
Right.
care. So it's like, yeah, you're trying to get them when they're all horned up. They're not thinking. They're just running after one thing. You can catch them slipping. So
I remember one time I was out there hunting and I seen this doe and she's got some yearlings with her. So she's about 50 yards away. She's on the corner of my eye right there. And next thing I know, I start seeing something move over here. And I kid you not. And if you're listening to this on the audio, I swear my head literally moved half, like 1/4 of a way, like just here, like just very little. And next thing I know, I look back over to her and she's just staring at me. And I'm like,
oh
how'd you
yeah.
see my head move from here to there? And I literally didn't move anything else. The wind wasn't even in our direction. It was going in the opposite way. It's like,
Oh, I
like,
swear I've
"Hey,
had
man."
those pick me up from blinking or like looking a different direction just with my eyeballs, because like I
Yeah.
said, like, I've had target panic. So I've been like extremely aware of like my body and like movement and stuff like that. So I'll see a deer come in, and it's probably a 3.5, 4.5 year old doe. And she comes walking into maybe 35 yards, 40 yards. And I cut my eyes off to the side and I look back and she stops. She locks up, snaps her head at me. I'm like, what the hell are you? Do I need to squint more? Like, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm like, I didn't move. I'm like, and you got me nailed in this tree. I'm like, what the hell, man? I was like, you can't win. Like, you just can't win. So yeah, and then, I mean, I've had, you know, multiple like little dinks, like forks and spikes, and they're sitting there butting heads and stuff. And they don't even care. Like, they're 15 yards, and I've got, I don't know, probably a half hour of footage of these little bucks sparring. And I'm just like, man, if I really wanted to, I could bag one of you so easy. Like, you guys are just oblivious. You're too busy trying to, say who the bigger guy is, but the bigger guy is up in the tree 30 feet staring at you, and you guys are just clueless. So yeah, it's kind of a cool thing. Like, I don't know, I like to take does regardless, to keep the ratio, because I think the buck herd, they just get decimated, you know. So I think the less does, it would help boost like a little bit of competition, because right now, I mean, it's kind of leveled out in the last like 2 or 3 years, I think. Um, from what I was seeing, like, but prior to that, the buck to doe ratio it was horrendous. Like, I would see one buck to 9 or 10 does.
Yeah, we got
And
kind of the same problem here in Michigan. High doe population. The ratio is just absurd. I don't know the numbers off my top of my head, but
I mean, this is just like what I've been seeing. Like, I don't know what the DNR stated it was, but this is just kind of like what I was seeing when I was out hunting, and I was just like, man, like, this seems like a problem. It seems like this is getting a little out of hand, because yeah, these bucks are able to go and breed any doe they want, but these bucks are able to go and breed any doe they want, and not only that, but then they're out there just running ragged all rut long, depleting themselves. And then if we get a harsh winter, they might not make it through. You know
with that
that
being said, are you able to bait and use minerals in and out of season?
No, you can put minerals out prior to the season, but you can't have. Well, actually, I think you can have mineral out during the season, but you cannot have any grain or any type of food. I think they allow minerals because it's not like an actual food source. It's a supplement. And I mean, not only
Very
that,
true.
but if you put mineral down in July and that salt block or whatever gets rained on and it goes into the soil, you still have mineral there. It might not be the block, but it's in the soil and it's going to be there for, the next however many years. So, I mean, I've seen deer just like destroy, 8-foot spot where I've had mineral lick out. So
I see here hunters may this is for your state. Hunters may not take deer with the aid or use of bait. I know here in Michigan we can't bait at all at any part of the season,
yep.
and we can't use minerals at all. And I said it. Jesse said it on our last episode where the DNR is basically like let the deer just basically starve to death and deplete, when we all know in Michigan and Minnesota is basically the same way with the harsh winters. And outside of that, you move to, they're going through the ruts, they're constantly depleting body fat, stuff like that. So when you move out of season, we keep saying, let's at least do minerals outside of the season so we can help replenish their bodies, to help them to get those minerals back into their bodies, because one, it's going to help them in the long run. We're trying to make them healthier. And two, the way the deer get their antlers from the bucks, at least, they get all that calcium stuff from inside their bones, and that's how it releases back up into their heads. And that's another reason why we like to be able to do it, is because we want bigger deer and better genetics. And it sounds like at least you in Minnesota, you're allowed to at least use minerals outside of the season. So
yeah, we can. I think we can even use it.
Because here in Michigan we can't do it, so it makes me want to cry. But whatever, we can only do so much. We can do.
Right. But yeah, no, I think you can use mineral in season. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a DNR officer. But I know that baiting in or out of season is you can't do it. And I mean, I don't know. Like I would rather not see Minnesota be a bait state like Ohio or any of those, because then you're just going to have guys out there with giant piles of corn drawing every deer in a tri-county area. And then it's just basically going to be target practice, and just like we talked about earlier, like sitting on the side of a tree or ground hunting or whatever, it gets you more in touch. Like you're watching these deer with their natural movements and just trying to play that chess match. And if you throw a giant pile of corn out there, it's like throwing a checkmate every time, first move. It's, I don't want to say it cheapens it, but I mean, that's kind of, I feel it kind of cheapens it, like I get one thing I do like to see here in Minnesota is there are a lot of people that put food plots out, and there are also a lot of farmers that leave standing corn. So, there is people that, are looking out for the deer herd. Some people take it upon themselves, but I mean, we spoke about this briefly prior to the podcast, that, the last couple of winters have just kind of been, very mild, and they haven't been, I mean, this last winter, we had one solid week during the first part of January where it actually hit sub-zero. Other than that, it was like 30s, 40s. I mean, all December was like 55 degrees. It was like I was wanting to walk around in a sweatshirt, versus, I mean, I sprung and I bought a bunch of First Light camo, and some of the real heavy duty insulated shit. And I never even got to use it because it was so warm. So I was like, well, next year, who knows? Maybe we're gonna have to buy a First Light T-shirt for December. I mean, it's getting to be a little crazy. But
I know on Christmas here in Michigan, it was muddy. It was like 75 and muddy. I had people go golfing on our golf course.
Yeah, it's unreal, and I'm hoping that this coming season is going to be a little bit more of like a traditional whitetail season. It's like every fall, it's like the first part of September, maybe mid-September, you'll get a couple cold days where it drops down into like the mid 50s, like low 60s or whatever. And then it'll get a little chilly at night, and you're like, ooh, this feels like deer season. You start getting ramped up, and it's like it's that familiar, it's like get you going. And then I mean, like I say, in the last 2 years, man, it's just been, you get that, oh, it feels like deer season, and then it's 55 degrees, dead calm winds, rainy, like nasty. It's like, well, we need a cold snap. We need to get these damn deer on their feet, man. But
Right.
one thing I did want to mention is that big 12 that I shot. He field dressed at 150 pounds. Like,
Oh, wow.
he was skin and bones. Like, he was wore out. I got a few pictures. I don't know if I sent them all to you, but there's one where he's laying on the ground and you can see his spine. Like, he was wore out. That was the first part of December. I think it was December 2nd, December 4th, maybe is when I shot him. But he was just wore out. And I mean, I could tell when he come walking out of the ravine, and he walked like 8 yards from me. Like, he just looked, just ragged, run down, like he was panting real hard. I was like, man, take a break. I'll give you a break, a long one. But yeah, it was kind of disheartening to see, because I mean, I had all these pictures of this big buck. I mean, the body on him was huge. The neck on him was just massive. His head was huge. But then when I shot him, looking at his body, I mean, he didn't have a lick of fat on him. He was just lean as lean could be. And, it's December. So, I mean, if he had like made it, if I had missed the shot and he would have gone on, like, who knows how long his rut would have lasted. But I mean, thankfully we had a mild winter to where he would have at least been able to go and forage for something. Because if we would have got a bad snowstorm, like, that would have been the end of it.
Well, it sounds like winters that we've been so used to growing up is basically just falling down, and just, it's weird. Just weird. I like I said, mentioned we had mud on Christmas Day. I was just mourning, like, what I'm seeing posts on Facebook that my friends out there golfing, walking around. I was like, it's Christmas. I grew up when we had 20 million feet of snow, and now I don't even see one little freckle of snow on the ground. So it's weird to see how hunting's kind of turned into that as well. And I miss the days where I was sitting out in this tree stand, and I'm middle of December and I'm just soaked in snow, and just, all right, it's freaking cold, man. There's snow everywhere. And you just got your arms into your armpits. You're like, I'm going to stick it through. And but
separate the boys from the men at that point, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, the baiting thing in Minnesota, like, that's, I know that's been a big controversy as well, because we touched on that CWD hunt that I went on, and I know that the DNR, like, they put out bait, when they do their intensive harvest or whatever, and they go and they try to, collect samples or whatever it is. They hire sharpshooters, and then, they put out bait, and they take deer, and then they sample them and test them and all that. And I mean, I was a little leery about going on that CWD hunt to begin with, just because I don't want to. It doesn't matter if it's CWD, EHD, or COVID or a sniffle. I don't want to eat a sick animal, right? Nobody does. You want what you're bringing into your family to be most healthy, nutritious food possible. You're not going to bring in a wart covered deer or some shit like that and be like, here's my warty doe, but it's a little, I would say, hypocritical for the DNR to sit back and say, you guys can't bait, you can't do this, you can't do that, because bringing these deer into close proximity to each other where their noses might be touching or they're trading saliva, it's going to pass the CWD onto the herd, and you're going to have this huge outbreak. And then we're really going to have to come through and just wipe these deer out to, stop the spread, and then they go out and pour, 10,000 pounds of corn out, and then have guys with thermal and night vision sit up at 2 a.m, just dumping deer left and right. They're treating it like, Texas is with their hog problem, and I mean, I don't quite agree with that. I mean, I was looking into the positive cases of CWD in Minnesota, and it's the percentage, like the chance, the odds that you're going to shoot a deer with CWD are pretty freaking low. Even during during a CWD hunt in a CWD area where you can kill 5 deer, the chances of you getting a sick deer are pretty damn low. And not only that, but then you're required during that CWD hunt, you're required to take it in and get it tested anyways. So I think it was like less than 1%. So I was like, you know what? The hell with it. If I can pick up a gun in mid-December and go out and try and get a deer for my freezer, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
And I ended up not seeing shit, but I walked like 4.5 miles. It was good exercise. But
I remember listening to this other podcast. It was the Minnesota Deer Lab podcast, and I had to look it up, so I'll bring it up for tomorrow's episode, where 2 hunters got diagnosed where the disease transferred from the animals to humans, and both hunters got don't quote me on the name of it because I don't even remember. It's chronic Jacobs disease.
Yep, Crutchfeld-Jacobs or Jacobs-Crutchfeld. I don't know.
Yeah, everyone says the J word wrong or
CJ.
differently, but and I read something a bit about it. I don't remember all of it, so I'm not going to get too much in detail on this show. But yeah, I remember hearing something about that.
I remember that same story. I think I just read that recently as well. I don't know. We all lived through COVID, right? We all dealt with the sensationalism of disease and crap like that. It makes it hard for me to like really trust like that what I'm being fed is truthful. So like I like to do a lot of my own research. I like to like I don't take one person's word for it and be like, yep, came down from God. They said, this is what it is. I like to trust but verify. So I'll go through and I'll look up cases of CWD, transmission. And the way that they worded that article was a little bit weird because they're like hunters that were known for eating CWD infected meat. It's like known for eat like they're just like looking for CWD infected deer and like I'll take it, give it to me. Like I don't know, man. I don't know. That to me sounds like they're trying to paint a certain picture. It was a little bit weird. But I mean, you never know, right? You'd rather be safe than sorry. I'm not going to put my family at risk when it comes to that kind of shit. But it to me like it seemed a little off, and I was just like, well, is it, but but like I said, I still went on that CWD hunt, man, and I was like, they say to not consume any of the meat until you get your test results back, and they say it's like I think 7 days or whatever for you to get your results, 5 to 7 days. I was like, well, it's gonna take me a day to butcher and then a day to pack it all away and get it all broken up and vacuum sealed and all that crap. So I'm like, I'll have some time, but yeah, it was I don't know, man. That whole CWD controversy is, if you look at neighboring states like Iowa, Wisconsin, I mean, South Dakota, they're not doing the same things that Minnesota's doing. Minnesota's still on the intensive harvest, monitor, test. Like it's rough, and it seems like almost like recently, like in the last 4 or 5 years, that it might just be my paranoia about the future of hunting, but it almost seems like there is a vendetta against the deer herd. Like I noticed that the public land that I visit frequently, it used to be thick brush, a lot of wooded areas and stuff like that. The DNR has been coming in and clear cutting it, and they're basically looking to make it into like a pheasant habitat. And it's like I don't, I enjoy pheasant hunting, but I don't need to be a mini South Dakota. Like I would prefer to have some grasslands, but also have some woodlands to where I can go out and hunt pheasant or deer, and not just pigeonhole all of the public land in Minnesota only to pheasant hunting or grouse hunting or duck hunting. It'd be nice to have some of that area, that's geared or, basically set up for deer hunting. But I've noticed over the last 3 years that 3 of the public properties that I've been visiting have been clear cut. And I'm talking like massive, massive amounts of woods and huge brush piles. Like I used to walk in, like every morning that I go out, I walk in like black ops, like dark, I hate pulling my phone out to look at my Onyx. I have my screen all the way darkened, and I'm sitting there like, putting my phone up in my shirt to try and keep, because it's bad enough you're walking out there and you're making noise. You don't want to be a damn lighthouse out in the middle of darkness either. So if you're trying to be, covert and be tactical about it, you don't want to go out there with a flashlight zipping around, and like, making your presence known. So I would always go and set up on this one public spot, and I would set up just with my back right at the thicket, and it was real thick, nasty stuff. And I would just post up and I would just stand, during gun season. And I have my blaze orange on. I'm like, everybody can see me. If you can't see me, then you're colorblind, because I'm just standing here. And every morning, the deer would come out of the thicket, probably about 80 yards down to my left, and they would walk out in front of me about 30 yards. And I could basically just watch them. And like, as long as I didn't screw it up with my movement, they would just mosey on through. But this last year I went out there, and I'm walking and walking and walking. I'm like, shit. I'm like, I should be there by now. Where the hell is this thicket? So I finally broke down. I pulled my phone out. I'm like, well, I'm here. I'm right here. I'm right on my pin. I'm like, I'll just, plop my ass down and wait. And I sat there, and sun came up, and I'm sitting there looking out in front of me, just oblivious. And I see a little fawn, and, I kind of poked my head up, and fawn picked me up and kind of bounded off. I was like, well, at least there's deer. Sun came up a little bit more, and I start looking around. And I snap my head back. I'm like, what the fuck happened to the, all the thicket, man? I'm like, it's gone. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, I don't know, 60 yards from like a 55, 60 foot high brush pile. And I'm like, they took it all out. I'm like, that sucks.
Oh,
I'm like, this place is probably going to be garbage. It's like they just destroyed so much habitat. And I'm like, I get that, you want a diverse, ecosystem or whatever. But it's like, man, I come out here to deer hunt. I don't even want to go out here and pheasant hunt, because it's kind of it's a tough area to pheasant hunt. It's a lot of tall stuff. You have to have a dog. If you don't, like, good luck finding your bird. But yeah, it's disheartening to see that, the actions that the DNR is taking, and it just seems to be adding up into the column of hunting not being what it was when I was more like hunting what it was when I was growing up, but not like hunting what it turned into. Because the deer hunting in Minnesota is actually, I feel like, is improved substantially from when I was a kid. But it almost seems like in the last like 5 years, like 3 to 5 years, that it's starting to like take a turn. And it's like the habitat, dismantling the whole CWD like idea, and the way that they're handling that. It's just like, I don't see that as being a very sustainable, plan for the future. And I don't know if you guys have dealt with a lot of that stuff out in Michigan, but it's everywhere. The CWD is, it's everywhere. So it's like, how can you combat it? You can kill off every deer in the state, and then wait for other deer to come in from South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, and North Dakota to replenish our herd. But even then, you might have infected deer from another state come in, so you're going to be back to square one. It's
yeah, it sounds like it's not just one state. It sounds like there's a couple states that are kind of in we need to start doing something better on the conservation side on a bunch of things. And Michigan is definitely one of them. And it sounds like Minnesota is kind of like teetering, though, kind of a little bit on both sides of it. And I think a lot of things need to be done. And I think that just goes to show that in some way, hunting is just kind of dying in a lot of these areas. So they don't really care much, and they pretend to care. So they're trying to do these things of promoting it, hunting and stuff like that. But in my opinion, I think they're doing it in a wrong way. But with that being said, though, Darrin, we're getting close to the end of the show here. Was there a story or a topic, though, that you didn't get to share tonight, or we didn't get to talk about before I let you go for the tonight?
No, we kind of like touched on quite a bit. I
Yeah.
bounced around, bounced around all over the place, but hunting it's been, like my biggest passion since I was a kid. Like my old man and my mom used to go out slug hunting, and it, we would go over to a family friends for that weekend, and we would stay there. And my folks would go out hunting in the morning. They'd come in for coffee and cookies or donuts or whatever, and then they go back out for the evening for those 2 days of that gun season. And every time they would come in, my brother and I, we'd be on like pins and needles, just like waiting to hear the stories. Like, did you see anything? And a lot of times it was like, well, no. But I mean, every once in a while it was like, I got a buck, it's like, oh, sweet. And we'd run outside, and we were always just so curious. But, you know, to be able to, go out hunting, like like I said, have my dad take me out my first time, and be able to harvest that doe, like my first morning out, it had me hooked. And, you know, I want that opportunity to be able to be there for future generations. I want, you know, the ability or the opportunity to go out and, just have that place where you can just go and just have all of the bullshit from your day-to-day life and just shut off, and you can just be at peace for even just a moment. That's like something that it's going to be. I'm afraid that it's going to be a fleeting thing in the future, especially with like what they're doing out there in Michigan, and what seems to be the way that they're going in Minnesota. And I saw my brother post on there the 9-day slug season or gun season right over rut. There's so many factors. It's like the allowing the crossbows, the CWD stuff, the 9-day gun season. Then we also have, like, I think it's a 9-day or 12-day muzzleloader season. It's almost getting to be like, they're trying to include everyone, but at the same time, it's like you got to have a little bit of a barrier. You got to have it be challenging. You can't just like guarantee success. That's what makes hunting so unique and so different from a lot of things, is like you can do everything right and still fuck up. It's just like it's one of those magic things where you could do everything wrong and still be successful. You know, it's just kind of like a crude mystery, but it's it's something that future generations, I hope, are going to have access to, and not have to lease land for you know $1,600 for a season. That's going to be a barrier. To have, I think it'd be cool to have like access, to give people access to land and opportunity, but at the same time, like, don't let the opportunity become equity, equal outcome, because give everybody equal opportunity, but don't let it just be like, oh, it's a guarantee. Like, you might as well just go to the grocery store and buy your meat. So to me, it's more about the experience. It's more about getting out there, like we were talking, like sitting on the side of a tree, freezing your ass off, and being exposed like a raw nerve, and having that deer come in, and you have to hold your shit together, to be as successful as you possibly can. It's a battle of wits. It's something that's just, it's untangible for most people, and most people who don't hunt, they'll never understand it, unless they get out there and they try it, you know.
Yeah, hunting is it's a sport where it's not instant gratification like nowadays, where everyone's got the TikTok shorts, reels, stuff like that, where they get that 15, 10-second, whatever.
The dopamine hit, yeah.
Exactly. So that's not hunting. And whatever you see of people going out there and shooting these giant deer, that's awesome. That happens, but you don't see the work and the failures that they've done leading up to it.
The one
And
thing that kind of like really gets me is like seeing a new hunter kill like a 170. I'm like, man, that is so awesome. man, you got a tough road ahead of you to up that one, like
Exactly.
you'll be chasing that the rest of your life, and you might not ever, shoot a bigger one than that. So, it's like I'm glad my first deer was a doe. It's like I can always improve from a doe, man.
Right.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like the delayed gratification is, you're working for something bigger in the future, and not only that, but you're growing. I wouldn't even say hunting is a sport. I would say it's more of a lifestyle. It's more like it's a mindset. It's a lifestyle. It's it permeates like who you are. It's so much more than just a sport. Um,
Well, it
but yeah,
carries into your everyday life of
yeah, well,
who you
absolutely.
really are.
Yeah. I mean, I can go walk down the street, and if somebody talks, says the word hunting, or whitetail, or I saw a buck, I'm like, and I could have a best friend in 30 minutes,
Right.
and it's just like I was saying back at the beginning, it's kind of like it's a community. But unfortunately, like I think that with a lot of this modern technology and stuff like that, like that community aspect is kind of dying off. And I think it's really cool that you're doing this podcast, and um, that's part of the community building. You know what I'm saying? And it's bringing people together over a common interest and a common lifestyle, and trying to spread that. And it's a great thing, and it's a hell of a lot better than TikTok, hands down.
I can't stand TikTok. Everyone out there that's watched shows, I make comments basically on every episode of how much I hate TikTok.
Yeah, dude.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it's rough, man. Like, but yeah, the delayed gratification is a huge thing, and it's a major thing with, I think, with like society nowadays. Just our culture. Like
mhm.
everything's got to be right now. If it's not right now, I don't want it, and I think that's bullshit. Like anything that's worth it is worth waiting for. And if it was easy to get, then everyone would have it. And if it's hard to get, it's probably not worth. Or if it's easy to get, it's probably not worth it. If it's hard to get, it's going to be a hell of a lot more worth it. So it's
Well, it's
you
like
get
we were talking about before the show where we've put all like where we've shot these deer and we feel amazing at the end of it. But then like 2 days later, we just feel sad and it's like a bittersweet feeling. But leading up to it, it's like the reason I'm happy is because I put all this work into it. So
yeah,
yes, I'm happy. But at the back end of it, you're just a little sad because you know that all that work you led up to it and you finally capitalize on that deer and now it's over. But it's all that work that led up into it. So now you're feeling 10 times better for that.
yeah, it's a weird like dichotomy. It's like a bipolar feeling almost. It's like how can you feel so much joy and so much relief and so much like self gratification, but at the same time like despair. And it's almost like it's almost like you know it's like losing a pet, damn near. It's
Mhm.
almost like it's a relationship that you build with that animal. Like that big 12, I hunted that deer hard for like 3 years. I sat over 100 sits, and you know i I busted my ass. Like I ruminated over trail camera pictures and weather data, and I mean, you name it, man. And to have it all just like boom, like 15 minutes on a Sunday morning, and to have that deer laying 60 yards in front of me on his side, and it's over. It's like it's almost like you're sitting there like pinching yourself. It's like, man, is it really over? Like, now what the hell do I do? It's like I spent all this time, and it's like it's like building a big ass cool sandcastle and then having the tide come in and wreck it, man. It's like you get that one moment when you're finished and you're like, sweet, it's done. It's finally done. And then whoosh, well, that was cool. you know, but yeah, it was yeah, that feeling of it's almost like a regret. It's tough. It's tough to replace that feeling of, you know, loss, basically. Closing the book, like you said, closing the book, ending the chapter, the only thing you could do is pick up the pen and paper and start a new book. So
Exactly. And I love the way you phrase it right there. Darrin, I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show, taking time out of your day, your family to come on and talk with us.
Oh, I love it,
If
man.
there's any way that people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Facebook, Instagram, I guess. Yeah, that's about it. I'm not. Yeah, that's about it, man. Like I'm not too. Like I do a little bit of social media, but I try to limit as much as I can because man, that's a black hole. It's a black hole. It'll suck you in and just keep you there forever.
Get you there, buddy.
Yeah.
Well, Darrin, I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show. We're definitely going to stay in touch. And I was going to say thank you again and hope you have a good rest of your night, brother. And Brian, you're out there. What, no TikTok? I'm not pulling up TikTok, Brian. I effing hate it, man. I ain't going to do none of that crap, man. Thanks, Darrin. I hope you have a good rest of your night, brother.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's good talking with you, man.
Thanks, you too, man.
All right.
Oh, man, what a great guy. All right, there we go, Brian. I agree. Yeah, I think TikTok these days, it's not just in the hunting world, but it's a downfall in society in general. Attention spans and these kids and just in all humans now, it's just getting worse and shortened. And yep, TikTok is just a bad thing in my opinion. Anyways, that was the conclusion of tonight's episode. I just want to thank you everyone for tuning in to tonight's show, commenting. It was an amazing show, an amazing outtake for tonight. It was just amazing. So thank you everyone out there that watched and participated in tonight's show. Tomorrow we'll be back at it for episode 76 with Jordan. But with that being said, I hope everyone out there that you put your quarter in the slot machine, put your quarter in the slot machine, help us share the show and spread the word about hunting. Like I said, dying sport, dying lifestyle, and we can't do without your guys' support. So everyone that is out there doing that, thank you everyone so much. And make sure to check us out on our website, whitetailadvantage.com. Make sure to stay up to date what's going on with us. You can always reach out to us on our social media platforms. Mainly stay on Instagram where we do a lot of our communications. You can always send us an email at brettbovin@whitetailadvantage.com. If you always want to come on the show, we do update our website though, where if you see the guests that we have coming up for that week and it says ask the audience, that's us saying we don't have a guest scheduled for that day. And we're opening the door to you guys if you want to come on the show. You don't have to be from that state that we are covering. So for instance, this week in Minnesota, we were filled all the week. But if it said ask the audience and you are not from Minnesota and you want to come on, you can come on. I'm not going to tell anybody no. Anyone that wants to come on the show, I'm never going to say no. But that being said, we are also on Waypoint, so go check us out on the website, Waypoint TV. And with that being said, thank you again, everyone out there, and we'll see you tomorrow for episode 76.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Whitetail Advantage Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time.